How you doing? This is Coffee Break with Jimmy. And, we've talked a lot about fraud and what's happening with fraud, what Shirley brought up, in Minnesota and here in California, this hospice fraud. And this is a different kind of fraud. Now, we're talking fraud that other people, this is money being thrown at something by the government, whether it be the state of California or Minnesota in this case. And they would use that money and give it to other people, and then they wouldn't use that. This is different. What I'm saying is they wouldn't use that money to help others, okay? They would put that money in their pocket, and that would be the end of it. And that's just called stealing, outright stealing. Now, when I was in the Marine Corps, I used to work on the J-79 turbojet engine, which went into the F-4 Phantom. And we used to have to put these little safety screws on each flange. You had the compressor, you had, which was what would bring in the air. Then you have your combustion chamber, which would raw fuel would be dumped in there to heat up the air. And then you had your turbines, which would push the plane. And that was a turbojet engine. Well, anyhow, in each flange, you had to put these little safety screws on there. And it was a little screw, a little nut on the end, then you would put a safety wire that had be some holes in the screw itself, where you put a safety wire in there. You'd attach the safety wire, wrap it around there, and so the screw wouldn't vibrate off and FOD, foreign object damage would FOD the jet engine. And but each one of these screws, you had every one that you went in there when you went to work on the engine, you had to count everything that you took in there so you knew how many you needed, you knew how many you had. And it wasn't just for the fact that you wouldn't want to lose any. Of course, that wouldn't work too well with a turbojet engine that would fought a motor in a second. Anyway, you had to keep track of them because each one of these screws were like $50 a piece. I mean, that's what they cost. Now, I could take in the local hardware store here in town, I could buy a box of 20 of them for $1.19. But yet each one of these screws with the nut would cost $50. Now this is, you can go back to the $50 toilet seat or the $50 hammer, and that's what the military would have allotted for those certain items, okay? Now these were items like the screw and the toilet seat and the hammer. These were items that you would buy, you would purchase with the funds you had with the military. Of course, that was more than enough to spend. And, you can go back, we'll talk about that in a second, but they had more money. This money would line the pockets of the congressmen, senators, there would be extra money there that had to be spent, okay? Now, that's fraud in a sense where actually the government is ripping us off because that's taxpayer dollars. Now, that's a different kind of fraud than this other fraud like we're talking about with this hospice. People are just taking the money and sticking it in their pocket, not doing anything for anybody. They weren't purchasing anything. They weren't helping anybody. That's a different kind of fraud. So there's all different sorts of levels of fraud. And in this case, this is how the government acts. Now, I don't know the teachers union, the teachers, they say the union, they have to spend so much money for books and notepads and pencils and so on and so forth. A lot of times, the teachers themselves would purchase this stuff that they needed, whatever paper or whatever that they needed, they would purchase it themselves, for their classrooms. And a lot of times it was actually spent by the school and so forth, so on and so forth. But I don't think there was much fraud or overspending in that way because I know the school I went to, there was a lot of fundraising, a lot of different things that they did to help the school make money to keep the school up and running really well. So I can't say like that there's certain things like maybe the fire department or the police department, they had so much money that they would spend and they didn't have really wasteful spending in those departments. And these are all paid for by the taxpayers. But the military did this. The military did this all the time. And it just wasn't, you didn't say anything or this bring this out to where it would hurt the military. You didn't want to hurt the military. Now, what I was saying just a few seconds ago about how Trump, he was saying about Air Force One. They were building a new Air Force One, and they wanted so many billions of dollars to build the Air Force One. Apparently, Qatar donated a plane for the president. Of course, this plane was probably a couple of $1 billion for this particular plane. But even Trump said he had cut back some of the funds and some of the money that was going toward the plane to make it more, not say profitable, but make it, to where it didn't cost us much money for our taxpayers. There was one time, and this is relative to this, the United States was going to build a new embassy in Jerusalem. Trump was told, now this was his first administration, Trump was told that, well, it was going to cost a couple of $1 billion to build this new embassy. Trump says, why is it going to cost so much money to build an embassy in Jerusalem? And then they said, well, that's just how much money we have allotted for this embassy. Now, they would use that money, of course, again, the congressmen, senators, they would line their pockets, whatever extra money they had, and that's what they would do. And their people around them, they would line their pockets also. Trump said, don't we have a building of sort that we own some property or something already in Israel, in Jerusalem? And they said, yes, we do have a building there, and it's a nice building. It's plenty of room and a nice building to build an embassy, and to transfer it over to an embassy. I don't know what it was before. And they said, well, let's look at that. Well, this building, because it was already built, but it was owned by the United States already, they put $400,000 or $500,000 into this building to make it the new U.S. embassy. So Trump just saved us $1.5 billion, something to that effect, on this building by not spending this extra money, because this money was going to be allotted to build a new embassy in Jerusalem. Now that just shows you how he could save money. Trump knew how to do that because he's a businessman. He's a builder. He knows how to make the most of his dollar, make his dollar go as far as it can. And he would do that for us. This was something that the rest of the government didn't do, hasn't done for a number of years. Like I said, they just throw money at it and they expect it to be done. Okay, case in point, the California speed rail. I've talked about this probably too much. But $33 billion was going to cost go from Los Angeles to San Francisco. Well, now it's already up to $126 billion, and they've only gone to Shafter and Merced. That's just here in the Central Valley. It hasn't even reached L.A. or San Francisco. That just shows you how much money is being spent, just money thrown out. Now, that's fraudulent spending. That's fraudulent spending. Doge had that fraudulent spending. We talked about that with Elon Musk and his guys, and now that everybody just turned on him. Well, this is largely in part why people in this, I just call it the Democrat Party, and others, and I think more people are more and more are liking Trump more and more because of the things that he's doing. Even though right now gas prices, they came down a little bit and they're going up, but they're going to stabilize. The cost of living is going to be coming down once this conflict in Iran is over. But everybody likes Trump more and more now than what they did before. And even when in his first administration, I always thought he was a Democrat, and I really didn't care if he was a Democrat or a Republican. I liked him. I liked the way he was. I liked the way he did things. I liked his personality, and a lot of other people did too. But as soon as he said, "Okay, we're ripping ourselves off. Other countries are ripping us off, and that's going to come to a stop." Well, there goes the cash cow for all the senators and congressmen and women. And so now instantaneously they hate him. Okay, now they want him out of there. Like Hillary Clinton said, I forget what she said, but anyway, and she's all of a sudden she went against. I mean, Trump was at Kelsey's wedding. Okay, he was friends with the Clintons, and But now that he wants to do away with the wasteful spending and the country ripping us off as the people, well, now more and more people are starting to see that. And this is fraud. This has been fraud. Fraud's been in the administration. Fraud's been in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. Fraud has existed in just about every aspect of our life. And Trump's getting that down. Now that he's getting all these investments, I'm just saying, just think about this. We're getting all these investments for other countries, investing in the United States. Trillions of dollars coming in. Okay, we're $36 trillion in the hole. That's our deficit. Okay, if we're getting, I think it's $18 trillion that's already been said to be invested in the United States from other countries. Now, this is invested in different, factories and different things that they're investing here. That's going to create jobs for America, and good paying job, by the way. So this stuff happens. Just say there's extra money now. We knock down the deficit. We reduce the deficit, and there's these kids that are going to college getting degrees, and then the degrees once they graduate from school with a degree. Now they got this loan that they have to pay off, for their education, and they can't get a job because of AI and other things that usually like this. They have a lot of jobs out there that AI can't do anything about. They can't do anything about plumbing and swinging a hammer and building a building. That's really good jobs, good paying jobs out there for everyone else, but. Just say all those people, I mean, you could say 40 and above or 50 and above, that have paid an exorbitant amount of taxes in their lifetime, interest rates, an exorbitant amount of interest rates in their lifetime, paying for their homes, paying for rent, whatever they're paying for, all these extra interest rates. The Fed charging us up the wazoo for interest. Maybe I'm told that Trump's working on something. That they're actually been talking about getting rid of the Fed for some time. I don't know how they're going to do that or if they can do that. But they've got too much control. What is that, 122, the richest people in the world really control the Fed? Do we really want 122 of the richest people in the world, the Rothschilds, those like that, I guess, that are part of the Fed? And maybe some of this money come back to us, right? Maybe some of this money come back to those of us that are 50 and above, or maybe even 60 and above. We're retiring on our Social Security. We don't have a good retirement plan. They say 60% of the people out there that are retiring don't have a good retirement plan, or even it's more than that. I believe it's more like 69% of the people don't have a good retirement plan. They got Social Security, and if that's going to be there for us, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. But I understand that there might be something in the process, and just think about that. Wouldn't it be nice for us to get some of that money back, some of those interest payments, some of those the taxes that we've been paying, some of that coming back to those of us who've been paying it for a number of years? The compound interest, all that money that compounds for all this time. Wouldn't it be nice to get a little bit of that back to help us out in our retirement? That's what Social Security was supposed to do for us. And apparently it hasn't really done that well for those that have retired on Social Security as it is. And so that's just something to think about, because I understand, my wife has told me some of the stuff she's listened to, a couple of different podcasts and a couple of different things have been posted in social media where it says some of these things like this, that this may be something that's going to be happening. I don't have all the facts on this, but this might be something that's happening. It's just like I heard a quote the other day. It's kind of relative to this. A smart person, can change his view, not so much his mind, but his view on something, as long as he's presented with the facts that he can change his mind. But an indoctrinated person no matter what, won't change his mind even if presented with the facts. They're going to hold firm to what they've been indoctrinated into. They just can't change their mind. And maybe this is something that is relative to this in certain ways, that maybe this could happen. I don't know. When I get some more facts on this, but that's just a thought, okay? And that's an opinion of mine, and that's just a thought. This could happen, especially with all this trillions of dollars being invested in the United States. Maybe those of us here can get a little bit, not so much the younger crew. They still got a lot of years ahead of them to work and maybe do some things a little bit differently. May not have to pay so much in interest rates on their homes, or have to pay so much in taxes, and because we do spend a lot of money in other countries, but that's to protect our investments in other countries also. And you have to do that. So we'll have to wait and see where that goes. But that's just an idea, something to think about, something to make you go, Anyway, this is Coffee Break with Jimmy, and, I really didn't want to sit here and talk this much about that, but about the fraud, but man, that's what's going on. The fraud, I didn't want to have to say the word socialism, but that's what's going on right now too. They don't have a clue of how this country could work on socialism. It wouldn't survive. It would not survive. So we'll talk a little bit about that next time, okay? So this was Coffee Break with Jimmy. Please subscribe, hit that like button, and share, and comment. Comment on some of the things I've said, and we can go from there, okay? We'll see you next time. Thanks.